Hello everyone, Vinavate here, and in this rundown tutorial, we'll be creating this image without using any render software or engine. This is a two-part series. This video, that is part 1, will include the modeling of the building in SketchUp, composing and arranging the building and the surrounding landscapes in Photoshop. In part 2, we will focus on the building, texturing, materials, and finishing the composition. So without any further delays, let's get started, Vinovators. So I'll start off by creating a rectangle 5 by 3 meter, and then just by using the push tool, just push it out to 8 meter in length. So then push out that face again by tapping the Ctrl key to duplicate the face, and just push it out to be 4 meter, and then again push that face again, push it out to 8 meter in length. So essentially what we have is a 8 meter length rectangle, and then I'll just delete these inside faces as I don't really need it. And then what we have to do next is to just duplicate these lines just to show some planks. So what I did was copied it to that endpoint there and then just divided it by 20. So what this does is divide that face with all the lines which we just copied. Set your view to parallel projection so as to select your right faces properly. And then to create that curve through the center, we'll use a plugin called Vertex tool. Link to the plugin will be provided in the description below. What SketchUp is, it's a line and face editor, so it's not a vertex editor. So you can't really edit the vertices or the points where the lines intersect. So what this tool does is, it helps us edit vertices. And then with that right rectangle selected, just click on the plugin. And as you can see, all the vertices are represented by these colored dots. The red dots, they represent the selected vertices, and the blue dots represent the unselected vertices. So what we have to do right now is to give a soft selection radius of 4 meter. Why 4 meter? That 4 meter is the length of a middle rectangle, right? So what this does is, it gradually selects the middle rectangle of our model. And then as you can see, it's represented by these colored dots, so it's like a gradual selection. So with our soft select radius typed in, just hold and click on this axis, and it indicates that we can rotate this selection to our desired angle. So I just rotated it by 90 degrees. And as you can see, what this plugin did was get hold of the selected vertices, and keeping the faces intact, just rotated our selection. I think it looks pretty nice actually. And now what is left is to just maybe indicate a glass facade on the left side of our model, just for just to show that there is a living room maybe. And then set our scenes, and then we should be pretty much done with SketchUp. So what I did was just offset it by like 23 centimeter. F is a shortcut for offset, just to indicate a floor slab and a roof slab. Just push it in by like 1 meter. So that'll be like maybe a deck of some sort. And do the same thing for the front side too. So offset it by like 23 centimeter. So that'll be where our glass is. So that'll be our glass facade. Just erase all the extra lines. And pretty much there we have it. Just push it in a bit. Just offset it like 23 centimeter. Yeah, I think that looks fine actually. We're almost done with the model. I'll just add a few lines along this right side of the model too. So I'll just select the lines, move and copy it by 20 centimeter, and then multiply it by 40. So what it does is, it moves then copies the selected lines by 40 along that face. And there we have it actually. Now what is left in SketchUp is to just set our scenes, our shadows, and we'll be done. I switched on the shadows, and what I'm looking at right now is how those lines through the center creates pretty harsh shadows. We won't be needing that, we'll just be needing some gradual shadows. I just moved the model up a bit as I didn't like the shadow which it created on the ground. And I think this looks pretty fine actually. Now set your style to hidden line. Switch off model axes and then create a scene. So what we need to do is create two scenes, one with just shadows and one with just lines. To have a scene with just shadows, you go to edit and make sure your edges are ticked off, and as you can see, all the lines are hidden now. And now update your scene, and there we have it. There we have our shadows, and in the next scene we have just the files. Make sure you export them as a very high quality PNG file. Name it to lines, make it around 8000 pixels, and do the same for your shadows. Now we are done with our SketchUp. So I start off by creating a 1080p document, 300 pixels per inch. So this will be our base background file. Just give it a name, twist, and start bringing all the files which we just exported from SketchUp. So we have a lines file. So I just created a copy of the lines file and made a base file. The reason I'm doing this is because later on I will be extracting the lines from the file and we will need a base to work on. So what we are left is with three files, that's the shadows, the base, and our lines. Now just start bringing them into our main twist file. Resize them using Ctrl T. Just place them approximately in the center. And now I'm just adjusting the background a bit, give it some color. So what I am going for is like a moody, overcast day. That's why I started off by giving a gray background. So before composing your image, what I like to do is to create a very rough drawing of what we are going for. So I created this very accurate depiction of a landscape and a river stream running through the center where we have our twist, and just some trees in the background to, give it some depth. I think it looks good, lol. Now starting off with the landscape, so I went to Google and I just typed in like a green hillside. So I'm just looking through some landscape images, something which I can use to create the landscape in our file. I like this image a lot, so I brought it into Photoshop and named it into landscape, bring it into a twist file. Hitting Ctrl T to resize, scale it, and just drag it around, see what works, see what doesn't. So composing images like these, it's usually just trial and error. You see what works, you see what doesn't. Apply a layer mask, invert it. So what this just did right now was hide it. So mask controls the visibility. What is visible, what is invisible, and that's pretty much it. Just select a round brush, and what you're doing right now is drawing over and showing what needs to be visible. So with the background roughly drawn, I'll just move on to selecting a few trees. So I went into Google, search for high resolution trees or high resolution pine trees, and while you're doing this, have a look at tree line images too. So take notes of how the trees line up on the background. I liked these three tree files, so I brought them into Photoshop, just roughly scaled it a bit, resized it. Now holding down the Alt key, I just started duplicating the tree files and started creating a line of trees behind our twist house. Remember guys, we're roughly composing it right now. It's mostly like a trial and error method. So now with the trees and landscape roughly done, let's focus on the sky. So I went into Google, searched for some clouds wallpaper, any cloud images which I liked, and or search for images which I could use. I like this one right here. So I bought this into Photoshop, scaled and moved it around and see which suits it best, and applied a black and white filter to it as we are going for this overcast day look. And then apply a mask to it. Now invert it to hide it, and now using a round brush, make sure your opacity and your hardness is set to minimal. So what you have to do right now is just dab on the sky a bit, just few slight touches so it slightly reveals the sky a bit. And as we move along modeling it, we will make slight adjustment to it. And the shadow was a bit unnecessary for our modeling, so what I did was apply a mask to it. I made a selection using the pen tool and just hid it. Always use masks in composition like these, as it's mostly a trial and error method, so if you make any errors later, it's really easy to just come back and undo your changes. So now just moving on to applying some finishes to a landscape, I downloaded these grass brushes from Brush Easy. There are a lot of options. I recommend browsing through most of them. So as you can see guys, this is where our mask comes in handy. I didn't like how the landscape looked initially, just make some slight adjustment to it and then apply your mask. Okay, now loading your brushes in. Now the brush is set to their default preset, so you just have to change it up a bit, as the grass texture, it won't be really monotonous. And then switch on shape dynamics and scattering on. Just play around the settings a bit until you get what you want. So what we are looking for is, variation in our grass texture. Now just start painting in your landscape. And as you can see, I had made a mistake here in our landscape, and this is where our mask again helped us. Just disable your layer mask, move it a bit, and there you go. Then I started drawing these grasses around the base slab of our image. So what this shows is that the model, it's set into the landscape and not like cutting around it. So this makes it look like as though the model is properly set in our landscape. The reason I'm giving it a slight opening over there is because I wanted a river stream running through the middle of it into the void over there. In Google, I just looked up for river stream images, nothing too harsh. We are looking for a soft flow of water. So I think this image looked pretty okay. I liked the composition, and it was what I was looking for. Apply a mask, invert it to hide it, and just start painting it in. Yeah, just start brushing it in, and do not worry if it doesn't look okay right now, because we can make adjustment to it later. It's just a mask. The base image remains untouched. That is the magic of it. So one shortcut what I try to remember is if you paint it in black, it hides, and if you start brushing it in white, it makes it visible. And don't use, like for the edges, don't use a hard round brush. Make sure the hardness is set to very minimal. And now the composition is looking pretty okay. I'm just adding some few slight touches before I move on to finalizing the landscape. Just filling in all the extra spaces which are left out. Arranging the trees to finish off the line of trees behind. Just warp a few of them so as to not make every tree look similar. Apply a few hue and saturation layer adjustment to a few of the trees behind so that it looks like there are shadows falling on them. So now that we have our basic landscape and background set, we'll just start color correcting them. So I just to our trees layer, remember I made them all into a group. So to our trees layer, add a hue and saturation adjustment layer. And make sure you clip it, and then just play around a bit with your saturation and your lightness. Yeah, I think this looks okay. Now do the same for landscape. Apply a hue and saturation layer, clip it to the layer below, and just start adjusting it a bit. Our whitest white on the screen is the most exposed source, so all objects around it need to behave accordingly. So while creating this image, what I imagined was the sky to be the most exposed source. So keeping that in mind, that is when I played with the hue and saturation color of it. As I was going for this overcast day, all the lights and colors around it needs to reflect on our materials. Fade out the edges to blend it. Yeah, I think that looks okay. And just, keep adjusting it. So this is where the mask is our best friend. Now apply a hue and saturation adjustment to our river stream. Clip it and just play around with the hue, the saturation and the lightness. Now you might be wondering about what do we do about the void underneath the curve, underneath that twist. So what I did was I just duplicated a tree and sort of brought it below, covering up that layer. So this sort of indicates that there are a lot of shadows going on, which makes it really dark, and it's not really uniform like filling it out with a solid color, it just didn't look right to me. And then I imported a hedge or a bush into the file just to finish the composition and to give the image a bit more depth. I created a new layer for the shadow, used a soft round brush, hardness set to minimal, and just started fading it a bit towards the bottom part of our bush. Made some slight correction around it. Now add a hue and saturation adjustment layer to it so it matches everything around it. That's where I'll end this video today, everyone. In the next video, we'll be focusing on the building model, applying textures, materials, and finishing the overall composition of the image. Hope you guys learned something. Thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. I'll see you in the next part. Bye!